How many people get Alzheimer's? 1 in 9 people suffer from the disease. How many years can a person live with Alzheimer's? Average, 4 to 8 years. Drug name, Lecanemab. Therapy type, immunotherapy, passive. Target type, amyloid-related. Conditions, Alzheimer's disease. U.S. FDA status, Alzheimer's disease, trial phase 3. Company, Biogen, Eisai Company, Limited. Japanese drug maker Eisai comes up with new drug Lecanemab for treating Alzheimer's disease. Tokyo-based Eisai and Cambridge, Massachusetts-based Biogen disclosed the clinical trial results in a news release. More detailed findings about the late-stage study will be presented on November 29, 2022. It will be at the Clinical Trials of Alzheimer's Disease Conference in San Francisco. The study is the latest as to a 3-decade-old theory that Alzheimer's disease is triggered by amyloid beta plaques in patients' brains, and that it can be slowed by drugs that target the buildup of those plaques. Drug companies have struggled through a long list of failed clinical trials with amyloid-targeting drugs. The failure of drug Aduhelm last year, and the disappointment it brought to people with Alzheimer's. The positive data also offer Biogen a second chance after the company's disastrous rollout of another Alzheimer's drug, Aduhelm. That medication won regulatory approval last year despite little evidence that it could slow cognitive decline. It received only sharply limited coverage by Medicare and has proved to be a commercial failure. Lecanemab is administered via intravenous infusion. The trial was the largest to date to test whether clearing the brain of plaques formed by the accumulation of a protein called amyloid could slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Aduhelm is designed to work in a similar way. As with previous anti-amyloid drugs, some patients taking Lecanemab experienced brain swelling or brain bleeding. But the prevalence of these side effects was lower than with Aduhelm and other experimental medications. Eisai had already applied for accelerated approval, the type of approval given to Aduhelm. The process allows the Food and Drug Administration to greenlight drugs if they have uncertain evidence of benefit, but affect a disease's biological pathway in a way that is considered reasonably likely to benefit patients. The company said on Tuesday night that it would first continue with the accelerated approval process, with an FDA decision expected by early January. It will then use the newer data to seek full approval. Accelerated approval requires companies to do further trials and prove that their drug works. Approval. Approval is for a class of Alzheimer's drugs known as monoclonal antibodies. They would fall under Medicare's decision to pay for the drugs only in clinical trials. Medicare's decision to limit payments to drugs in clinical trials followed the FDA's handling of Biogen's Aduhelm. If Lecanemab secures FDA's accelerated approval in January, Eisai will quickly seek the more conventional, full FDA approval. Then patients can access the drugs outside of a clinical trial, said Ivan Cheung, Eisai's United States CEO. Analysts predict that Lecanemab, or any effective Alzheimer's medication, would most likely be a multi-billion-dollar blockbuster. For Biogen, it puts them back in the Alzheimer's game, Brian Scorney, an analyst at the investment bank Baird, said. Biogen's share price surged on Wednesday, climbing as much as 43% in early trading. Success of experimental Alzheimer's drug hailed as historic moment. Study shows cognition in early-stage patients on Lecanemab declines by 27% less than those on placebo. An experimental drug has slowed the rate of decline in memory and thinking in people with early Alzheimer's disease. It is being described as a historic moment for dementia treatment. Lecanemab is an investigational humanized monoclonal antibody for AD. It is the result of a strategic research alliance between Eisai and BioArctic. Lecanemab selectively binds to neutralize and eliminate soluble, toxic amyloid beta, A-beta, aggregates, protofibrils. They are thought to be contributing to the neurodegenerative process in AD. As such, Lecanemab may have the potential to have an effect on disease pathology and to slow down the progression of the disease. The cognition of Alzheimer's patients given the drug, developed by Eisai and Biogen, declined by 27% less than those on a placebo treatment after 18 months. This is a modest change in clinical outcome, but it is the first time any drug has been clearly shown to alter the disease's trajectory. This is a historic moment for dementia research, as this is the first phase 3 trial of an Alzheimer's drug in a generation to successfully slow cognitive decline, said Dr. Susan Kohlhaas, the Director of Research at Alzheimer's Research UK. Many people feel Alzheimer's is an inevitable part of aging. This spells it out: if you intervene early, you can make an impact on how people progress. Experts have not given thumbs up to the drug made by Eisai, but Dr. Joanne Pike, President, Alzheimer's Association, has said that the results show a positive development. However, Dr. Alberto Espay, a neurologist at the University of Cincinnati, advised cautious optimism. He felt that the positive effects were still minor. In the study, which enrolled roughly 1,800 patients with early-stage Alzheimer's, patients were given twice-weekly infusions of the drug, called Lecanemab. Toxic plaques. It was also shown to reduce toxic plaques in the brain and slow patients' memory decline and ability to perform day-to-day tasks. About a fifth of patients experienced side effects, including brain swelling or brain bleeding visible on PET scans, with about 3% of those patients experiencing symptomatic side effects. The results offer a boost to the amyloid hypothesis. It assumes that sticky plaques seen in the brains of dementia patients play a role in damaging brain cells and causing cognitive decline. A series of previous drug candidates had been shown to successfully reduce levels of amyloid in the brain, but they did not show any improvement in clinical outcomes. It led people to question whether the research field had been on the wrong track. Rob Howard, a professor of old age psychiatry at University College London, UCL, said, "This is an unambiguously statistically positive result, and represents something of an historic moment when we see the first convincing modification of Alzheimer's disease." Eisai and Biogen are expected to apply for regulatory approval in the US and Europe by the end of the year. If approved, healthcare providers will have difficult decisions about whether to fund the drug. Therapy requires infusions every 2 weeks. It has to be decided that who will be eligible for it because the clinical improvements seen by patients fall just below a widely accepted benchmark. On a 14-point scale used to assess Alzheimer's progression, patients on the drug scored 0.45 higher than those on the placebo treatment, with an Alzheimer's patient being expected to decline by about 1 point a year. Howard said, "The accepted minimum worthwhile difference ranges from 0.5 to 1.0 points, meaning that there are going to be some very difficult conversations and decisions in the next weeks and months. The overall benefits will depend on whether patients on the drug maintain a better trajectory beyond the first 18 months. But the latest data cannot answer that question." There are also questions about whether the drug could slow decline at an even earlier stage. Eisai is recruiting people with a high risk of Alzheimer's who have not yet developed symptoms to take part in further trials to try to help answer this. The prospect of an effective Alzheimer's therapy will focus attention on the ability of healthcare services to deliver treatments to the almost 1 million people affected in the UK. 1 in every 14 people aged 65 years and over. According to Alzheimer's Research UK, only 1 in 3 psychiatry services would be ready to deliver a new treatment within a year, and in the UK, many patients are diagnosed at a much later stage than those who took part in the latest trial. In a briefing for reporters Tuesday night, Ivan Cheung, the chairman and chief executive of Eisai, said, "The results represented the first definitively positive large clinical trial to show that you can indeed slow down Alzheimer's disease at this very early symptomatic stage." He said that the drug started to show a benefit to patients about 6 months after they began taking it, and that the benefit increased until the trial ended, 18 months after patients started on the drug. The companies plan to present more detailed results in November 2022. Some experts said the drug's ability to slow cognitive decline, by 0.45 on an 18-point scale, was modest at best and might not be a difference that patients in the mild early stages of the disease would notice. Dr. Lon Schneider, director of the California Alzheimer's Disease Center at the University of Southern California, said, The effect is small and would not be considered by many as a minimally clinically important difference. However, he added, others would strongly disagree and say it's clinically meaningful. Dr. Schneider said the relatively low rates of brain swelling and bleeding relatively low than Aduhelm. He added that although taking a press release at face value, which is often a chancy thing to do without having real data or reports, it seems that Lecanemab would most likely receive regular marketing approval based on this one study alone. Clinically meaningful. In the briefing, Mr. Chiang said the company considered the results very clinically meaningful. But he added, of course, there are different opinions out there on defining what clinical meaningfulness is for this stage of disease. Other companies are also developing treatments that could shake up the market for Alzheimer's drugs, which before Aduhelm had not seen a novel treatment for 2 decades. Before the end of this year, Roche is expected to report data from 2 studies of a drug known as gantenerumab. The FDA is expected to make a decision on whether to grant accelerated approval to an Alzheimer's drug from Eli Lilly known as donanemab by early January, with results from a larger study of that drug due in the middle of next year. The results from the study on lecanemab set a high bar that I think will be hard for the other drugs, if they are successful, to beat, Mr. Scorney said. Alzheimer's Association statement on lecanemab Phase 3 top-line data release. On behalf of the more than 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's disease and their families, the Alzheimer's Association enthusiastically welcomes the positive top-line data reported today by Eisai and Biogen on the Clarity AD Global Phase 3 clinical trial of lecanemab. These are the most encouraging results in clinical trials treating the underlying causes of Alzheimer's to date. For people in the earliest stages of Alzheimer's, this treatment has the potential to change the course of the disease in a clinically meaningful way. These results indicate lecanemab may give people more time at or near their full abilities to participate in daily life, remain independent and make future healthcare decisions. Treatments that deliver these benefits to those with mild cognitive impairment, MCI due to Alzheimer's disease and early Alzheimer's dementia are just as valuable as treatments that extend the lives of those with other terminal diseases. Even with the success announced today, we must redouble efforts to discover new targets and test new and more effective treatments for Alzheimer's and all other dementia.